Welcome to the Industry Experts Panel at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com. My name is Michelle Holliday. Today we are thrilled to have as our guest one of the most recognized figures in the investment community, Mr. Jim Rogers. Jim is the legendary investor who co-founded the Quantum Fund, which rose over 4,000% in 10 years and allowed him to retire at the age of 37. He is the creator of the Rogers International Commodities Index, the RICI, and the chairman of Rogers Holdings. He is coming to us today from Singapore. Jim, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm delighted, Michelle. I'm delighted to see you.
We are thrilled to have you here. We want to start off with asking you a question. Jim, would it be fair to say that the American businesses are doing well while the federal government is drowning in debt? In other words, can an investor separate risk analysis into two separate parts these days? Firstly, the concern regarding federal issues and mismanagement of the U.S. dollar's strength. And on the other side of the equation, elevated stock prices compared to historical valuations. Or are these two sides actually interlinked?
Well, Michelle, if you give me $1 trillion, I'm going to show you a very, very good time. And that's what's happening.
Okay.
The federal government. Or you give me $500 billion or
Right.
$5 trillion, whatever you're going to give me. If you give me big, big money, or I will do something and we will have a lot of fun, I assure you. And that's what's happening. The federal government, for better or worse, is gigantic deficit spending. The Federal Reserve, the central bank, has had a lot of loose money around. So all of this money is going somewhere, and it's going into the American stock market. Many other stock markets in the world are not doing nearly as well because they don't have this gigantic fiscal boost that we have from Washington. It's not going to end well. You know, someday we're going to have to pay the price for it. But right now there's a fabulous party going on. So have fun while you can, if you can.
Now, Jim, from your perspective, would you say that the growth engine for the United States economy right now is based within the millennials generation?
I'd say more it's based with Washington, D.C. and all of this money which is being spent. Yes, the millennial generation is getting it, and yes, that's the future. But in the meantime, a lot of people are getting the money, old, young, rich, poor, everybody's getting it, and it's helping the entire U.S. economy. But certainly the millennials are getting their part. Millennials do have a slight problem, many of them, and that is that there's the student debt situation, and that's mainly the millennials. Older people didn't have the advantage or disadvantage of student debt once upon a time. But other than the debt, millennials are getting their part too.
Now, Jim, in your opinion, is the wealth division inside the United States a cause for a major concern right now? Do you feel that it has crossed the danger zone into possible civil unrest? And if you feel that way, might that lead the government to openly discuss changes for the major entitlement programs, such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
Michelle, when the problems come, and we will have problems, I assure you, when they come, everybody's going to be looking to blame somebody. They always do. They'll blame foreigners, they'll blame banks, they'll blame rich people, they'll blame everybody.
Right.
When that happens, you're going to see all sorts of accusations, all sorts of pleas for change, all sorts of pleas for relief. So yes, you're going to see all of that happen. But Michelle, it's always happened. Always throughout history in every country in the world. There's nothing new about it. We have our certainly disparities, as you put it. But again, this has happened many times in history, and much greater wealth disparities in other countries historically. But we have them, but there's nothing new about it. And then, by the way, if you can solve it, you will solve a problem which no one in history has ever been able to solve. Philosophers, generals, holy men, nobody's been able to solve this kind of problem.
A cyclical thing, Jim, where everything sort of evens out and then years later there's a big wealth gap and then it evens out again? Is it cyclical, or are we in an extraordinary time right now?
No, it's always happened. It's happened many, many times throughout history, not just in the U.S., all over the world. When you go back to ancient India or ancient Japan or China in the old days, the wealth disparities were unbelievable, just staggering the way rich people live compared to the way poor people live. So no, it's happened many, many times. There's nothing new about it. Eventually, when things go wrong, if it's bad enough and people are angry enough, they have a revolt and a revolution. I doubt if we're going to have that, but who knows? Strange things have happened throughout history.
What do you think will resolve this?
Collapse.
The collapse.
Whenever we have great prosperity, and when I say we, I don't mean the United States exclusively, I mean anybody in the world. Whenever you have great prosperity, excesses develop, then reactions set in, and the excesses get cleaned out. We have a collapse. You define collapse any way you want to, and then we start over again. What happens is, the people who had committed excesses get caught out, they collapse, they go bankrupt, and then everybody's in despair, and there's economic decline and problems, but then we always start over again, at least so far, for several thousand years, and I suspect we will continue to start over again.
Should investors own gold, or is holding a portfolio of companies which grow faster than inflation offer a better hedge for financial protection?
Well, it depends on when, Michelle. I own gold at the moment, and I have for many years. I have not bought serious gold in a long time, and I'm not buying it now. But if and when gold goes down, I expect if it goes under 1,000 US dollars per ounce, I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot more gold. Everybody should have some gold in their portfolio as an insurance policy, if nothing else. And if you get the timing right, you can own gold and you can make a lot of money. I own it. I'm not selling it, but I'm not buying it now. If and when, I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot more.
Do you think it's going to drop below 1,000?
Well, that's my view, but Michelle, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. So don't rely on me for your market timing. I'm the worst short-term trader in the world. But I expect it to go under 1,000. And if it does, as I say, I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot more. If it doesn't, I own it. I've got plenty of gold. Don't worry.
Now, Jim, if you were 20 years old right now, knowing everything that you know today, looking at the big picture, what would be the profession that you would choose?
Well, it doesn't matter. The simple answer to that, and the only answer to that, is what you love. If you love gardening, you should be a gardener. And someday you'll be, first of all, if you love what you're doing, you'll never go to work. You'll wake up every day and you'll have fun. And those are the people that are the happiest, and those are the people who are most successful because they just do what they love. They never go to work. You get up every day and start having fun. So those are the people that's what you do. Now, if people laugh at you, it makes it even better, Michelle. It probably means you even a better future and a greater future and greater prosperity. So don't listen to me. Maybe they should listen to me. Listen to you, but not to me. Do what you love. Not what your parents love, not what your friends love, not what your teachers tell you to do. Do what you love, and that's how you'll be happiest and most successful. And by the way, Michelle, if you're not successful, you don't care. You're happy. You're plenty happy, so you're very pleased with life.
Exactly. The key to it is happiness. Now, Jim, speaking about what you were touching on just a few moments ago, there is something called the global monetary system that people are talking about a lot as being on the verge of a reset. Have you heard about this, and what are your thoughts about this?
Well, there certainly is a global monetary system. There always has been. People have been trading for certainly for thousands of years, and you have to use something as money when you trade. In the past few decades, we mainly used the US dollar. But Michelle, the situation now is that gigantic debt has built up everywhere. America, the United States, is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Whenever that has happened, historically, when somebody gets massive amounts of debt and excess is set in, and then you have a problem. Every country in history that's gotten itself into this kind of debt situation has had a crisis eventually, or a semi-crisis. So yes, it's coming, Michelle. First of all, I should remind you, we have always had financial setbacks and economic problems every 5 or 10 years throughout history. So there's nothing unusual about it. It's coming again. The next time it's going to be really, really bad because the debt is so much higher now. We had a problem in 2008 because of too much debt. Michelle, since then, the debt has gone very, very high everywhere in the world. So the next economic problem is going to be the worst in my lifetime. Not going to be fun, but again, it always happens. This one's just going to be worse because of so much debt. Monetary reset, you can call it what you will, but there's going to be big change because of all this debt.
Talk to me about this a little bit. When we're talking about big change, get a little bit more specific with me, Jim. What does this mean? Not specifically just for the United States, but for the world at large, globally speaking.
Well, you're going to see many companies and many people go bankrupt. I hope I don't go bankrupt. I hope I'm smart enough to survive it. But many people are going to go bankrupt and disappear. In 2008, we had Lehman Brothers disappear. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers has been around over 150 years. Bear Stearns have been around 80 or 90 years. These are long time companies. You're going to see things like that next time. You're going to see companies, institutions. You're going to see countries, and you're certainly going to see governments go bankrupt, and you're going to see countries go bankrupt. Before we had Iceland go bankrupt last time around. Ireland went bankrupt. Well, these were small countries that didn't affect the world too much, but we're going to see more of that. If you go to Europe, for instance, Great Britain has staggering debts right now, but not just Great Britain. Portugal, Spain, Italy, many people have staggering debts. You're going to see companies, individuals go bankrupt, markets collapse, stock markets collapse, bond markets collapse, currency markets are going to have huge turmoil, and a lot of people are going to suffer very badly. But you'll have a job, Michelle, because somebody has to report all this. So you have job security to tell us what's happening and what to do.
Tell you how bad it is. Now, when do you, from your experience, predict this is actually going to start to take place? I know it's taking place in certain areas of the world, but when will we see it here in the United States?
Well, Michelle, it's as you point out, it's already happening in some countries. I'm pretty bad at market timing. The way these things always work, it starts somewhere where we're not looking, someplace small, whether it's a company or an industry or a country. In 2007, Iceland went bankrupt. But nobody knew or cared because most people didn't know there was an Iceland, much less that it could go bankrupt. But then Ireland went bankrupt, and then Bear Stearns went bankrupt, and then Northern Rock went bankrupt in the UK, and then Lehman Brothers went. Well, after a year or two of this snowballing, everybody realized, oh my gosh, there's a problem. Something's wrong out there. But this took a year or two. It may be happening now. We're already seeing countries and people get in serious trouble. It's not high on anybody's radar screen right now. Most people say, who cares if Venezuela disappears, or Turkey, or some of the other places that are having problems, because they're small. But that's how it starts. So it may already be in process. It's not on the evening news in America right now, so most people are not aware, but it'll eventually get to the evening news in America and everywhere else.
Do you think that we could be as bad as someplace like Venezuela? Most Americans, when they talk about socialism and they hold up signs that they want to be socialists, and they've never even looked at the news to find out what that actually means. It's very scary.
Well, not many people in the world want to be socialist anymore because socialism has failed. Communism has failed. Certainly nobody wants to be a communist. If they do want to be a socialist, they want to be a rich socialist, because everybody knows. But there are people still, as you point out, there are people, often inexperienced, or younger people, who don't know the history of socialism and how it has never worked. It's a good story. Communism was a good story. The problem is it's a story that doesn't work. That's not legitimate. No communist nation or communist country has ever succeeded. They always fail. But it's hard to explain that to somebody who's 23 years old, who's never seen much of the world. So there will be, especially in hard times, Michelle, there will be people who say, we must soak the rich. We must take their money and we must take everything away. It's their fault. And the foreigners, of course. They always blame the foreigners too. So no, there will be cries again. And it depends on how bad it gets. And I've said to you, it's going to be bad. The reaction will be stronger and stronger. I don't think America is going to become Venezuela, not anytime soon, but we're certainly going to have serious problems.
It's shocking that people don't look and see what's taking place right now, because Venezuela isn't history. It's current. It's now. Go and live for a week in Venezuela and then come back and tell us how bad capitalism is.
It's not just Venezuela. I mean, Zimbabwe, there are plenty of countries where you can go and say, oh my gosh, look what happened here. But Michelle, most people, not just in America, but most people never heard of Venezuela. If you started telling them about Venezuela, they wouldn't know what you were talking about, where it is, or what happened. It's not a good statement about the system, but very, very few people pay too much attention, especially to foreign countries.
To the rest of the world. Now, Jim, do you see President Trump's policies as being good for the United States dollar?
Well, yes and no. If you have trade wars, they usually lead to disaster. They always have led to disaster eventually. But in the interim, some countries, and in this case, probably the U.S., the currency does well for a while because people say we don't have to worry about the foreigners anymore. And so they will buy the currency concerned. And in this case, it is the U.S. dollar. So the U.S. dollar, I own a lot of U.S. dollars, not because the U.S. dollar is a sound currency. I've told you, America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. But I know that turmoil is coming. During turmoil, people have always looked for a safe haven. People think the U.S. dollar is a safe haven. Whether it is or not doesn't matter. They think it is for the reasons we've been discussing. And so the U.S. dollar will go higher, partly because of the trade war. The trade war is going to cause the worst economic disaster of our lifetime. It is going to cause the U.S. dollar to go up, but that's not going to be good for a lot of people. You know, everything we buy, we Americans buy, is going to go higher and higher in price. Cost of living is going to go up. American industry is not going to be able to compete, but everybody is suffering. If everybody in the world is suffering, Michelle, they're not going to be buying many Chevrolets or many things that we sell. So in the end, it's not good for America or for the world.
Jim, this has been so amazing to have you on this show. You have such an incredible legacy of work. Could you tell us a little bit about your history and how to follow your work right now?
Oh, Michelle, well, I grew up in a very small town in the backwoods of Alabama. I went to college. I went to the Army. I wound up on Wall Street for a while, had a reasonably successful career. But then I set out because I wanted to have adventure. I didn't want to have just one life. So I set out to see the world. I went around the world on a motorcycle once. I went around the world a car once. I got in the Guinness Book of Records a couple of times for my travels and other things. Basically, I've been trying to have fun for a long, long time. I know I would probably be richer had I stayed working on Wall Street day after day. But on the other hand, I don't want to wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, I had a very successful career, but I never did anything except Wall Street. So no, some of my friends have stayed working and gotten extraordinarily much richer than I am, but so far I've had a lot of fun. And that to me has been important.
Absolutely. Well, sir, it's very humbling to hear a legendary investor like yourself speak as if you're not, because when we all know your history. So
I'm a simple person. Please, please, please. Don't get carried away.
Well, it's been great to have you on this show.
Well, I hope we can do it again sometime. It's
absolutely.
Thank you. Let's try it again sometime.
Okay. Mr. Jim Rogers, Chairman of Rogers Holdings. For the Industry Experts panel, I'm Michelle Holliday at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com.